We're going to very soon kind of try to build that brain here using the different parts of this this room. So we're going to build a brain simulator here in a little bit. That's a fun exercise, but first we're going to look at this study from Australia. Now, because it's a study from Australia that at the time wasn't published, I don't know if it is yet, the professor sent me the slides without permission to distribute them. So you're saying, why aren't these in my notes? It's because I don't have the professor's permission to distribute the slides, but I do have the permission to show them. And so what he was doing was trying to figure out in a very primitive sort of way, what effect does post-traumatic stress have on brain synchronization? So he did it the roughest sort of way, and that is to say, let's figure the right back, right front, front, and left back, and see if how the timing of information is being processed in those parts of the brain. And so each of those parts of the brain, so the left front is this yellow signal, the left back has this green signal, the right back and the right front, and among other things you'll notice, as often is the case, that wouldn't be the order that we would put them in if we were thinking in terms of the sequences of the brain. But most researchers don't even know about that sort of thing. So one of the questions that has come up is, why don't more people understand or use the Shore model? Part of it is professional jealousy, because he's from UCLA and the people from USC don't particularly want to follow him. They'd rather get a theory from somebody else. Part of it is because a lot of people are not trying to figure out the big picture of how things work. They want to have a specific solution to a specific problem. So you take someone like Siegel, he'll take a particular issue and he'll say, here's what we know about the brain and how it applies to this issue. And so he tends to be very localized. Amen is even worse, as he just looks at the specific issue of the brain and tries to work the other way out from that particular spot. What can we know about how things are going on? So the more you are solution-centered, the more you're going to disregard the theory of how all things fit together. And the more you think of how all things fit together, the less detail you tend to think about how any given solution works. So
say that again.
Yeah, and I'll say it another way, and that is, when I teach people here's how it all works together, I think to myself, you can work from this framework, you can work to any solution you want. Here's the framework you can look at. But if I'm trying to teach you solutions, I will say, here's a solution, here's how this works, here's how you do it, here's the method, and now it ties up to this part of the brain. So you kind of back into it, goes, there's a reason for this. And so you tend to think of little sections of the brain, but they're really clearly tied to your solution. So solution-centered people typically won't give you a good system for how things work together. And system kind of people, that were more my way of thinking, are always going a little bit light on the specific solution. It's like, well, now given what I've told you, you should have a pretty good idea, what to do with anxiety. You're going, well, you never talked about anxiety. Right? But there's actually a framework here from which you could begin to look at, well, where does that fit into this? And that's why we're going to go to the brain simulator, because that's where you start actually making the tie-in. Okay, well, let's simulate this condition in a brain, and now what would you do? So I'm trying to bridge that, but you see I'm coming from the other side of the bridge. You've got this big picture now operating in your head, which is next to useless. Very helpful, but not useful. If I can split that word that way. So this guy is looking at it, and if he had a theory, he'd maybe put things different, but he's got a graphic artist. So the graphic artist says, okay, looking at what we have here, this is the left front, so let's put the diagram here, and this is the left back, so we'll put that there. Here's the right front and back and the right front, because he's trying to match the physical picture he's looking at as opposed to a theoretical structure. And you can see how that would happen, right? But what you can't see very easily is that there is a bright line and a dark line, a dimmer line behind there. So we're going to go to the next slide where they're superimposed on each other. And what we have here is the timing signal and how it looks in people without PTSD. And you notice that all parts of the brain are getting the timing signal almost at the same time. But here, the timing signal, which is this one, starts here and ends there. So this is, remember, pay attention and get quiet. This is pay attention, get quiet. You notice how much the voltage drops? Pay attention, everyone's quiet. Pay attention, everyone's quiet. Over here, pay attention, where is it? Quiet a little bit, but then everybody wanders off in their own direction. So you don't have the brain saying, okay, something important's about to come, pay attention, we all get quiet. All the brain together. And so the marked feature of post-traumatic stress is the brain is no longer listening to the same thing at the same time, paying attention to things. And that is, as crude as you can put it, what's going to make it hard to process your current reality. Now, what is actually happening, let's see, now to try to create a brain here. And the physical layout of the room is not very conducive to building a brain. Because there's 3 of you right here, I'm going to make you the prefrontal cortex, and we're going to have to wrap it around this way. So that's going to make you the cingulate right here, the yellow banana. And then we're going to wrap it around to here. You'll be level 2 down here. So you're the amygdala. And then we'll keep coming around over here, because the brain does sort of wrap around itself, and we'll make you level 1, the thalamus right there. So, and if you want to be the outlier on that, you can be the basal ganglia right in the front. All right. Now over here on the left side, we've got our prefrontal cortex here. We'll make you the cingulate, and we'll make you the amygdala. And Jim, back in the back, you can be the attachment center back there. Now, the thing that's interesting about this is this side of the brain almost never desynchronizes. So, because this isn't the side that puts together the picture. This is the side that tends to break down the picture into elements anyway. And it's not the side that processes the emotional load. So since you actually create a little emotional load of your own, as you're breaking it down and you're analyzing it, you have some feeling reactions to their analysis. So you're creating some feelings, but the feelings, by the time they get created, are deep enough down that you're already in the amygdala and the sections that are on all the time anyway. So, you know, there tends to be very little shutdown happening on this side. What you do, though, and I must really reprimand you for this, is that when you don't get a signal from that side, you rarely notice it, and you start doing some really dumb things. And so we'll get to that in a little bit. But this is the picture here. Now, to get back to this signal, we've got an amygdala on this side, right? And we've got an amygdala on this side. So what ends up happening in the post-traumatic brain is that the thalamus, and we've got the thalamus on this side, gets a signal coming in, and it seems like it might be important to you, personally relevant, all right? You pass the signal on to the amygdala, right? Now the amygdala in a PTSD brain is only interested in whatever might be scary. Unlike the three opinions, if it's not scary, what you will do is you'll say, doesn't seem scary to me, you'll send it to the amygdala over here. Does it seem scary to you? Because this amygdala is more focused on unseen dangers, and that amygdala is more focused on what I can see and understand dangers. You know, this is going faster than conscious mind, pulling up everything from the back, all the possibilities of something being dangerous. And you're pretty much focused on whatever's in front of you and what you see and what you're processing consciously. So you would look at it and go, doesn't seem scary to me, send it over there. Doesn't seem scary to you? No. So you send it back over here. Does it seem scary to you? Does it seem scary to you? Next signal's coming in. So whatever happened, it might have been personally relevant to you, but the amygdalas did ping pong with it until they lost the ball, and now the next signal comes in. So let's say, for instance, that you are in a classroom and you're a little child who's been post-traumatically stressed, dangerous and scary things have happened to you, and so you see the teacher up at the front of the class, and the teacher is saying to you, now children, this is the letter A. You know this teacher? Yes? Does she seem personally relevant to you? Yes, she said, this is the letter A, send it over to the amygdala. All right, you have an opinion about that. Is that scary?
No.
Not scary, send it over to them. Is that scary to you? No. Is that scary to you? Scary to you? Drops out. Level 3, that's right here. What do you know about the letter A?
Nothing.
Nothing. Did anything happen?
No.
No? Nothing being processed here? You're not sharing this with other people? This is not a relational moment? Level 4, is this personally relevant to you and your people and how you act? Anything about nothing? No. There's nothing to think about, right?
No.
You have the autonoetic memory. That is, you know that you are here and you are part of this. Do you know of anything happening? No. So you weren't there when the letter A was mentioned. You don't remember anything about that. Okay, over here, you'll pass whatever nothing over to the procedural memory here. You saw the teacher in front of you? Yeah, okay. Anything important going on up there? Nope, no. So you can remember there was a teacher there. She might remember she was talking. What she's talking about has no significance to you. You have no registered memory. A procedure that you should follow with the letter A, nothing's on track, right? Right? So how are you going to sort that out? Yeah, there's nothing much to sort, is there? Let's go and have a snack. Yeah, we'll think about whatever else. All right. Now, will the letter B get a different response? No, not unless there's something very rare about the letter B that I don't know about that would be very idiosyncratic to your particular background. Yes?
If the person's name began with an A or a B, would that, maybe someone said your name begins with A or?
If my name was scary to me, I would say,
It's only scary.
Yeah, with PTSD, the brain is only looking for scary input. So we're now scanning the world for threats. All right? Not a threat, this is irrelevant. Not a threat, this is irrelevant. That's the change that PTSD does to the brain. I'm looking for threats. Now that's what my life is about. I am keeping an eye on. And if you look at the polyvagal theory, for instance, which is one of the subsets, it's got some sure components to it and a lot of things going right. The polyvagal theory will tell you that the vagus nerve, and Alan Sure spent about 5 years working on the intelligent and unintelligent branches of the vagus nerve, so there's a lot of overlap right here, will change the tones that your ear listens to. It'll retune your tympanic membrane so that you will be listening to low tones and not the high tones, because footsteps and other threats approach you with low boom, boom, boom. So if there's a low tone, your ear will hear that. You'll actually not be hearing the higher tones of the human voice. So you've retuned your whole nervous system and your response to look for significant threats in your environment. That's what your brain is there to monitor right now.
And this
This
is
is PTSD, and we're just doing the PTSD brain here, what it does, and we've just got a very few of the things, because now your brain's value systems are all skewed in terms of how they're operating. You know, their novelty is going to be completely elevated, because anything unexpected is going to have your whole attention, so you can scan that for anything dangerous. Anything that you could predict is going to happen is almost ignorable, because you knew that was going to happen anyway, unless it's something you can predict that's extremely dangerous, in which case, you know, the amygdala will be for the first to let us know. All right?
How does somebody learn? When they got the PTSD, they do learn, but what is it that causes them to learn? Just trauma?
Basically, what you're developing is a fear map of the world. How do I locate all the scary things in the world, and what do I do about them? So you're learning now, how do I deal with everything that I'm afraid of? So if bad things happen to follow when my mom raises her voice, I'm going to learn everything I can about what to do when my mom raises her voice and how to deal with that. And the solutions can be extremely unusual. For instance, you might find that when my mom raises her voice, it's like you've cocked the gun, and this can go on for 5 minutes, 50 minutes, 5 days. We don't know how long it's going to be. It's intolerable, so it's best to have her shoot right now. So when I hear her raise her voice, the first thing I do is something that's really going to piss her off, so that she'll just shoot right now, because if she keeps charging, it's going to get really bad. So let's just discharge it. So as soon as I see it's getting her upset, I'm going to do something to really push her buttons, and we'll get it over with. And then that always follows with a quiet period. And so I can get to quiet real quickly. Now you'd look at that and you'd think, well, what's that strategy, right? Well, it's actually a fairly complex strategy based on what I've observed and how I'm going to avoid the worst effects. And the worst effects might be living in dread of what's about to happen. So, for instance, if it looks like when Grandpa's coming here, he's headed towards molesting me, if I can go and get that started earlier, that would be a very good strategy, because, you know, he doesn't get as agitated, and if I can do some of the things he likes, that'll reduce his aggressiveness. There's all kinds of things that come into that, and you can realize, if we run some of those through, that when you break it down and you analyze, why do I do this, you might come to some really strange conclusions about what sort of person I am based on my behaviors. And especially if the other person says, well, obviously you like it, or you wouldn't, whatever, you know, then you've got all of that's processing over here. You can see how you can very often get a lot of distress running on this side from your conclusion of what's actually been a harm reduction strategy on this side of the brain. In fact, one of the most confusing things that people have is that their harm reduction strategies look bizarre on that side of the brain, because you're not really focused or conscious of it. Second person I ever saw come in for counseling was a lady that came in, and she told me she ate paperback books. She was very ashamed of this, but she could eat 2 or 3 books in a day. And she, you know, bought books based on, you know, how they had to be, you know, larger books. You'd have a lot of paper, and this was her whole thing. And of course, she didn't want her husband and children or anyone else to find out that she ate paperback books. What conclusions do you think, just make up a few over here, do you think from this side of the brain you would make if you were observing that here's somebody eating paperback books?
Something wrong.
Something wrong, yeah. What?
Anxious, scared.
Anxious, scared, mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Huh?
Crazy stuff.
Crazy, I'm crazy, mm-hmm. Yeah, when you think about what would, if I have this reviewed by everybody I know and I tell them I'm eating 2 or 3 paperback books, what will the analysis of my social structure provide for who I am?
You are crazy.
You are crazy, yeah. Endear me to my husband probably if I tell him? Just the opposite? Okay, so if anyone discovers who I actually am and what I do, are they going to like me or not like me?
Not like.
All right. It all seems quite logical over here, right?
Right.
All right. So now this is my second case as an intern. And I went back over my files about everything they taught me in graduate school about people who ate paperback books, and I drew a blank look right over here. What is it like me and my people to do when faced with someone who eats paperback books? I'd never watched anyone do therapy, so I've gotten nothing. I've never watched anybody. My analysis draws a blank. I have previously not known answers to situations, often in test situations. What's my conclusion likely to be about myself? I'm woefully inadequately prepared. I can't handle this. Yeah. Right. So we're off to a great start here. Yeah. It's just the building of a therapist now.
They could eat worse things.
Huh?
They could eat worse things
They-
than paperback books.
They could eat worse things than paperback books.
Not fat in bulk.
Not fattening in bulk. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the attachment center down there coming up with some ideas. All right. Now,
The scriptures where God says eat this book.
yes, that's right. It's a scriptural thing to do. Yeah. All right. You have come to the right Christian counseling center. We fully support this practice. You will notice that it tastes like honey to your lips and wormwood to your stomach. Right, there we go. Oh, I just love a spiritual bunch like this. Okay, so let's go back to our PTSD child here and say now, over in the corner, there's another child who's starting to get agitated and raising his voice and poking his neighbor with a pen, a pencil or something like that. Is that personally relevant to you? Yeah? All right. Look over here. Is that good, bad, or scary? Anything scary about kids who would poke other people with a pencil?
Yeah.
Okay. Immediately, you're going to pass it on to this group. All right? Can you connect with that? People who would poke with other people with a pencil. Do you know about people who are violent or aggressive or hurtful or bullying, stuff like that? That's understandable to you? All right, now, okay, it's moving up to you. Okay, what do me and my people do with people who are aggressive, bullying, dangerous, and stuff like that? What have I seen people do?
Run.
I could run, yeah.
I could bully back.
Could bully back.
Could hold their hands. Could
Could
call
hold-
for help.
That's a nice thought, but holding their hands and calling for help in abusive environments rarely is well, this is what people do when my husband begins beating me, I just hold his hand and call for help. No, that's probably not it. What I could probably do, and this is the most common answer, is I could ally with this person. If I can get on their side, I will be safer than if I'm not on their side. So, now you've got this information, we've got somebody over there who pokes people. What would be a strategy to get on their side?
Join with them to poke other people.
Join with them to poke other people, right? All right, do you know how to talk about that? Break it down? Can you talk about poking people and bothering people and that sort of thing?
You get your pencil and get the equipment to poke people.
Yeah, get a pencil, stuff to poke people. Before recess even comes around, you've already figured out a plan of how to be like him. Now you haven't heard the letter A or the letter B, but you've noticed every threat in the classroom, and you figured out how you could participate with that or somehow be, not be a target of what's going on. And so you have a child who's now tracked every dangerous person in the classroom. They do not know any of the children that would be a source of joy. Never noticed them. But they notice every child that would be a problem maker in the classroom, and they know how to make trouble in a way that would be compatible with that child. And now who do you suppose they're going to go up to and engage with when the break time comes? All of the joy children or all of the problem children? All three. They will engage with all of the scary people, right? And they will grow up so that when they move into a neighborhood, they will notice all the scary people in all the scary places, and they will go to all the scary people and all the scary places and try to engage with them and neutralize them in whatever way you deal with these people so that you will have as safe a life as you can have. But what will other people say about what they're doing? We just send you to a new neighborhood, a new community, we put you in a new school, and who did you find there?
The troublemakers.
You made all the troublemakers, and you pretty soon are hanging out with all the troublemakers. And what do you do when you're with all the troublemakers? You make trouble. So if we move you to a new environment, what you're going to do? You're going to make trouble. So what kind of a person are you? Right? The brain, you're a problem child, you're a troublemaker. No matter where we put you, this is what we do. And no matter when you grow up with the brain configured this way, it will never notice the people who could have been there to be joy sources. So now let's go back to the simple. You need 5 people who will pray for you while you're in therapy. Is it possible that in your environment there are 5 joyful people who like connecting with God and would like to pray for you while you're going through this process? There's nothing about your brain, if it's got kind of a PTSD, fear-based format, that will even notice that they're there. It will not have explored the possibilities. And as far as you're concerned, at the conscious level, none exist, right? Are you telling the truth? Are you being honest?
Yes.
Yeah, you never got information to the contrary. You never thought to look. It's never been important to your assessment process. So you have not built the kind of social network that's going to support you if things are going wrong to build joy, right? And if we look at it, you don't have to have a whole lot of trauma, or what we consciously think of trauma, in order to map your brain this way. In my family, the worst thing in the world that you could do was upset my mother. That was the family rule, don't upset your mother. Now, my mother was unstable, her father was abusive, my father's father was a violent, abusive man. Both my father and my mother were conceived as a result of rape. And most of the family on both sides were either alcoholics or child molesters or something like that. We have, both sides of the family. So what do you suppose they could agree on as a way to build a good family? Well, we're not going to upset each other. And especially you're not going to upset your mother because she's the most unstable of the two of them, right? My father has got much more over-controlled hostility than my mother's under-controlled hostility. And so in order to be good Christians, we don't upset your mother. Everything about being a Christian is now hinged to making sure mother doesn't have emotions, especially none of the 6 negative emotions. So as a family, we monitor. Are we aware of any unpleasant emotions?
Yes.
Yeah, we track those things like the plague, Incoming bombs couldn't get more attention, right? And so we developed 2 completely different strategies between my brother and I. To the best of my knowledge, my brother has never in his life violated a rule. I never saw him violate a rule as a child. He was so compliant that he would take every rule and run it out to its ultimate, extension in every area of life. This is how he does theology to this day. He's a member of a church, very, very small church, because they're the only people who believe exactly the right things, and they aren't even quite right. But he's run everything out to the most careful extent, and he doesn't step outside of that. And this is his coping strategy, and he never sets anybody off because he never does anything wrong. Do you think my brother expresses any feelings? Yeah, I don't have that on my scanner either. Wherever they are, they don't come out. Is my brother married? No, quite right. Where did he work? IT. Just so you figure out, here's a place where, this is you can avoid all of this stuff. He tracks it, and, wherever he was wherever that stuff wasn't, right? He's mapped out the world, very small part of the world. Where do you suppose he lives right now? Woods, South Dakota. Yeah, out there, lowest population density, as far from people as he can. Yeah, all this stuff, this is the safest place to be, right? And he maps his world that way. He operates very nicely that way. You wouldn't necessarily look at it from the outside because, he's constantly translating and publishing theological materials, often from the original languages, in German, Greek, and Hebrew, stuff like that. And of course, it has to be the right kind of theological stuff, but he translates that. He wants to be part of God's kingdom. He wants to do something important, but you can't include any people in that unless they've been dead at least a couple of centuries, right? So this is how the brain maps that out. Now, I took a completely different strategy. And who do you suppose was constantly in trouble? Yes, So the source of any trouble within the world was probably me. And the thing is, they were rarely wrong, because we had enough rules that whoever it was that upset somebody was almost always going to be me, because I decided that trying to wait around for something to go wrong was unbearable. So why not make it go wrong as early as possible? And then I could get on with that. Yeah, let's get on with the punishment, and then we'll get on with the next step. So you pretty much have our childhoods mapped out if you want to, work that detail out. So, but the big thing we're looking for is any sign of emotion. If emotion is developing, trouble can't be far away. So we're going to avoid that. Now, it fit perfectly with our theology, because emotions are the cause of the unredeemable part of being human, right? Your will is the only thing that can be redeemed. Emotions are always what cause you to sin. Does that fit with the pattern of what blows up in the family, right? So then, as nice missionary family, what do we want to do with the world? And that is, we don't want to make sure we don't ruin our testimony. We don't want to do anything that will upset anybody who isn't a Christian. But of course, you don't want to cause your brother to stumble, so you can't do anything that would upset another Christian. And of course, the rest of them are your supporters, and you wouldn't want to do anything that would
Set your system.
Right. So now you've got a well-locked system. Every element of that is Christian.
Don't tell anybody.
Right? So, oh no. And so now this is all supposed to work together to produce this, the kingdom of God.
Love.
Yeah, love and all that, which of course means choosing, in spite of the fact that inside I can't stand you, to treat you the way I should. And my brain is going to monitor any sign of emotion and make sure that none of that gets a chance to grow or develop, right? So now we've figured out how to map another, brain system and how it would work together. So let's pick here's where I want to pick a garden variety trauma. And in because that's where I'm headed. It's amazing how little it has to be in order to be a trauma, right? Because if it's a feeling in my family, and I see one coming, is that something that can be shared with other people? Right? So, I start to feel like irritated with my studies. I've just been studying too long. I'm tired of being in my room. I want to climb trees. I want to do something. I'm starting to feel upset. So I look outside and I say, oh, there's my favorite tree, right? Was that personally relevant to me? All right. Now we go over here to level 2. Is that good, bad, or scary? It's scary because it's got emotion. What other kinds of opinions? Good? Yeah. So I've got good and scary at the same time. So we're going to pass that on to you now in terms of sharing it with other people. Is this shareable?
Not the scary part.
The scary part can't be shared. No. I couldn't tell anybody about that. I couldn't tell my dad. I couldn't tell my brother. I couldn't tell my family. I couldn't tell our supporters. Couldn't tell the other Christians. Couldn't tell the non-Christians. Right. So that part, scary. That's I am alone with the scared part of it. All right. So I'll have no help from anybody with figuring that part out. How about the good part?
Could be where I hide.
Well, don't let that be known to anybody. Yeah. You're getting in my tree. But could I tell people about wanting to climb trees and stuff like that, and that I like to go outside and play? Yeah. I've got some friends, I've got people like that. People could share that part of the experience, right? So I can pass that part on to you. I may want to say to you, let you know, but it's hard to let only part of the message through, right? So I'm going to leak some of that message through that I'm starting to get agitated about this, but we're not going to pay too much attention to that. But I want to go out and climb the tree. So you have any ideas about climbing the tree? What would be and my people do?
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay to climb trees.
Okay, it's okay to climb trees, yeah. So maybe if I can just get out the door somehow or another without being found, I could get up, climb the tree. No one can see me up in the tree anyway. I don't mention that part about hiding in the tree. It's a big tree, 115 feet tall, way up in the top. No one's going to see me up there, right? Okay, we're headed up the tree, right? Okay, you guys got a plan for getting me up the tree?
Sneak out.
Sneak out? Yeah, okay. All right. You can help me plot that out, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. And so then, you all will implement if I get seen on the way out, what will I have to say?
I'm going to have some fresh air.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Clear my
fresh
head
air.
so I can study.
Clear your head so I can study more? Yeah.
Yeah. Don't make
Okay.
mama mad.
Any other? Yes, comes right to your mind, doesn't it? Here's one of the interesting things about your side of things here, and that is that if you actually have information from that side of the brain about your experience and all the things, it takes you somewhere about 6 seconds to figure out what's going on, all this data, processing it through. But if you have no data, you will come up with an answer in about 1/3 of a second. Because it doesn't take you long to come up with an explanation when you don't have to include any data in it. Now, yeah, well, that's it. So, have you ever noticed that somebody has an instant answer to something without having to think it over? Have you noticed that when they have an instant answer, they believe it? And no one else with data believes it?
Right.
And does this not sound like your average marriage therapy session? Or parent-child session interaction? The less information you have, the faster you answer and the more convinced you are you're right. So this is what Carl Lehman calls the verbal logical explainer. Now with data, this is extraordinarily helpful because we need a verbal and logical explanation for the data. But without data, it's extremely unhelpful because it's just as convincing to you, in fact, even perhaps more because there's no contradictions. Nothing would contradict it. There's no data that would contradict this conclusion. With most real life situations, there's at least some data that makes you wonder if you're completely right. But here, there's no data that would make you wonder if you're completely right. So the certainty of it is much, much higher than it would be if you actually knew what was going on that side of your brain. And so one of the ways that I now catch myself, and that is when I immediately know the answer, and it's always, what's going wrong here? It's you.
Yeah, right.
All right? If you hadn't, I wouldn't.
Right.
And that's a third of a second. I just know if you hadn't, I wouldn't. As an analyst, now I learned, because my analyst sits over here, right? I don't mean my psychoanalyst. My analyst sits over here. It also goes, according to the statistics and the theory, you just answered that too fast. You are operating on no data, and it makes me mad. Down there, move it down the stream, it's like, who asked him? But it feels completely true,
Right.
whatever it was I just said, except for that nagging observer that I've learned, because of the theory, that still chirps in and comments on the whole thing. And so then you would be all amused to watch my brain grind to a halt as the analyst and the explainers get into it with each other and have no interest in whoever's in front of us, because whatever it is, they are not a resource, right? This is the one thing I'm sure of. Whoever's there, is not a resource. At best, they're the problem. I knew that. Maybe. But a resource, they're not. Because this table here, level 3, did not include them in the mutual mind situation. So I cannot process this with them as though they were a relational resource to me. And whatever examples you may have gotten of how my people handle this situation doesn't include people being resources for whatever it is that this table says we can't talk about with anybody. And our conclusion over here is if they do find out, they won't like me.
Right.
So we're not going there. Does that sound like your typical brain that you meet most of the time?
Yeah.
And so you would say, well, what was the big trauma that caused that? And actually the big trauma that caused that, you'd have to go back at least 1 or 2 generations to find out where it is in the family line. Because it didn't happen to me. What I did was I learned our response to trying to avoid my grandfather's getting upset, which my father then perfected. And now we practice for, we're not sure what reason, but we know it's extremely important. And the reason we know it's particularly important is because if not controlled, our relationships will all fall apart, and we know we'll be in big attachment pain. How do we know we'll be in big attachment pain? Because Dad and Mom had big attachment pain, and they've been trying to avoid it all along. And so now we amplify, again, down here, we amplify the intensity of anything that looks threatening to us. So even if Mom might not have been upset about it, no one is going to take a chance.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And actually, I don't know why. So when that actually played out for me again at a larger scale, let's do my mother's brain, and we'll just assume she had a right hemisphere, because there's great doubt that she had much, if any, at all, because the whole area was full of water. So this part of her brain from there over was all water, but that means that the rest of the brain was sort of squashed over to both sides, to this side. And while it was squashed over, it didn't mean it didn't exist, but it was extremely small, but it wasn't non-existent. So you just have to realize that, you can't say for sure what's going on. But, so my grandmother is raped, date rape, and that's how she gets pregnant. She's out in the prairies Young girls don't get pregnant out there. You don't process rape. You don't go in and tell everybody about it and stuff like that. Tries to hide the pregnancy, and has this little, rather tall, my mother was almost 6 feet tall, bright red hair. Not exactly the child you could hide from everybody else, right? But her mother was quite sure that she had given her to the Lord, and so she would die upon birth. She'd never grow up. So, but she doesn't seem to die. So her mother's going to teach her what's important about being a woman. And the important part of being a woman is that you never get close to and you never touch a man. So that is terrible. And I'm not going to tell you why. We're not going to talk about this. But I want to make sure, little girl, that you understand that any kind of touch, especially from a man, or any kind of closeness is like the worst possible thing. So if you, especially adolescents, young men, because the rapist was an adolescent, but you know, this is kind of going back in the files. So you see a young man, is that important to you? All right, let's move it up here. A young man, good, bad, or scary? Scary. Bad and scary. Ah, yes, bad and scary. All right. Okay. Can we talk about what's bad and scary? Well, very limited, right? You might be able to maybe say something to mother, but most of the time you better not say anything to anybody about this at all. All right? What do you do when a bad and scary man is there? What's our list of things?
Shut down.
Shut down.
Avoid him.
Avoid. Get as far as possible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Now you know that we're avoiding them like crazy. But no one's told you the story of why. Just that mother says, never, 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 no, this is the worst thing that could happen. Don't ever do it. So how are you going to explain that?
Impute bad motive to him. He must be bad.
He must be bad, yeah, and in some way that's way beyond even understanding, right? You know, there's just something completely bad motive, whatever it is, and if I let them close, what kind of a person am I?
Bad person.
I will now be as bad as they are, right? Okay. So are we going to say much about that? No one's talking, right? So, yeah. So we can understand it, we can go along with it, but we're not going to say very much about it. This is not the sort of thing you mention to anybody. You know, I've never heard Mom talk about it with anybody other than, you know, warning me. You know, so this is not social dialogue. We've got all these things going on. Will you conclude that having to do with men is bad and scary on this side as well, right? What kind of people would get close to men? Bad people would get close to men, all right? Okay, so this is my mother now, whose brain we're talking about. So I become an adolescent. So now there's an adolescent in the kitchen. Do you notice? Mm-hmm. All right. So over here, opinion about that? Bad, scary? Maybe another signal. This is, you know, you've raised this child for 14 years. This is going to be very confusing right over there. Now we're running just about every opinion the brain has about it. It seems like a child should be good, but they're now clearly bad and scary. So over here, is this something you can share with anybody? No? You're not going to stop and talk about that with the boy in the kitchen? No, you're not going to share your reactions inside about how bad and scary he feels? Okay, are we going to stay in the kitchen? No, we're not in the kitchen. Are we going to some other part of the house?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right, and when we get over there, do we understand why we ran to the other side of the house? No, we have not got any clear explanation for it. So now let's do my brain. All right, here's mother. I go to the kitchen and I'd like to see if I can get some bread. She sees me, runs to the other end of the house, and it's been months since she would be in the same room with me. Does that seem important to me? Okay. Opinions? Bad? Could it be scary as well? Mm-hmm. Huh? I'm alone. I can't even get a piece of bread without chasing my mother to the other end of the house. Painful. Do I have attachment pain amplifying this rascal? All right. So is this a big bad or a little bad? Okay, can I talk about this with anybody? No?
I'm
No?
bad though.
Well, they'll have to conclude that you're bad, but I feel bad. I feel bad and I feel in pain and I feel scared and confused, all these kinds of things I don't. Can I talk about it with my mother? No, she won't be in the same room. Do I want to talk about it with the other Christians? No, that'd ruin the testimony, because are there emotions with this? So now we want to load that into the circuit too. This is causing me feelings, right? So who am I going to tell about this? There's nobody in the whole wide world that this is going to be a part of. Okay, so what am I going to do?
Not ask your mother for bread.
Not going to ask my mother for bread. I'll figure out how to get my own bread, and I'll shut down. Stay out of the house. I'll be any place but my own house if I can help it, right? I got other places to be. There's trees. There's trees. Have I mentioned there could be trees? Yes. Does this happen in the trees? No, it never happens in the trees. No, the trees are good. Trees are safe. By the way, it's a mango tree. In case anybody wants to know why my favorite fruits are mangoes, I don't know if you're making a trap, but could mangoes be good? Personally relevant? Can I talk about them? Do I know what to do when I find a mango? Well, baby. All right. Mangoes, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mangoes are everything my mother isn't. And that's almost true, you know. There's only a slight commentary over here that goes, well, that's not quite the full story, but, you know, all right. And out of this, what can I talk about? Mangoes, I can talk about mangoes, I can talk about trees, I can talk about how much I like to be outside. I could go anywhere in the world and tell them about my adventures in mango trees and all of that. And what's my identity going to be if I think about it too much? Because I'm still aware that my mom won't be in the same room with me.
Something wrong.
There must be something really bad about me.
But don't you try to normalize that somehow?
I would, but if I look around every friend I have, any house I've ever been into, no one else's mother runs away and won't be in the same room with their child.
Must be me.
It doesn't look like something that happens to every other adolescent boy I know. And a lot of them are even badder than I am on the scales of things they do. So whatever it is about me, which I can't quite put my finger on, must be worse than any of the things I can think about that I know other people are doing, but I don't know what it is.
But it has to be you.
It has to be me because it only happens to me. My younger brother, who's still 10, doesn't happen to him. Right? Now, it will happen to him eventually, but I don't know that, right? So now I'm getting consistent view of this. What am I going to talk about with other people? Am I going to converse about this with my friends? Am I going to ask anybody, hey, find out what it is that's wrong with me? Because I'd really like to, you know, this is going to be the thing that will, it's never going to be explored, but will I have near absolute certainty that if anyone found whatever it was, they wouldn't like me? Rock solid. There's no argument against that, you see. There's no possible evidence that could suggest a different conclusion from that. And now you've configured my family. Okay. Now, at no point in this process have we invited Jesus in to see how he sees it. Because in fact, my family were all very good Christians, but no one believed that Jesus actually communicated with you. Well, there was sort of one exception. My mother did believe that a little bit. But it would have never occurred to any of us to invite him into this aspect of life. Because Jesus did talk to her a little bit about her ministry. He did talk to her a little bit about her call. He did talk to her about what he wanted her to do. But, so if you wanted guidance, there was a chance that God might give you guidance, right? Now, my dad didn't believe it. My brother didn't believe it. It never happened to them. But my mother did sort of believe that. But this guidance and what we're talking about here are completely not on the same map in the brain, are they? So the idea that you'd invite Jesus into this whole thing and let him, well, what would it be? Would it be guide you through it? Or would it be heal you? Guide, heal, heal and guide. Both. Have a relationship with you. See, what's missing as this is going through, it can be that the amygdala blocked the entire thing because it wasn't scary. If I'm too far into PTSD, we've got a shutdown happening down there because you're dumping everything that isn't scary. But if I'm not in, you know, sometimes with the checklist, my brain isn't always in PTSD mode. Even people with PTSD are not 100% in PTSD mode all the time. This isn't a checklist, this is how you happen to be functioning. If at the moment I'm in a secure attachment mode, my brain is stable and all these parts are connected and running together, and if I was to ask you how does appreciation or thankfulness feel in my body, you could tell me. Because you're actually connected and wired to that information, right? Now, it's not because it's particularly running through the whole system, it's because you're the ones connected to that. The single part of the brain that will give you that runs wires up to you and say, well, here's some other information you might want to know. So I could have checked that, and from time to time, my brain wouldn't be in PTSD mode. And in fact, if I could get my brain to be thankful and thinking about the joyful things in life that I knew about, my brain would be in its most stable configuration with everything running, everything synchronized, everything on together. Now if I tried to process anything through, it would move along from stage to stage because they were already up and running. They had plasticity, they had enough of the dopamine and other things going because they'd been on and running for a few minutes. And I could process things through that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. But if my brain is in its most unstable mode, it's shut down right there and nothing is coming through to this part and you're in a complete cramp. Because what happens when you've got no one to share it with, you just stay in a high arousal state. It's like, this is charged and I can't put it anywhere. So you don't just go to sleep and go, oh, nobody around. You go, and you don't come out of that. Now you can't tell the difference on this end because silence is silence, right?
Right, we don't know.
So yeah, so you might as well go to sleep. So that over here, the activity drops all off and you look over here in the scanner and it's like,
Yeah.
So you're taking a nap waiting for something to happen. And meanwhile, if this is bad and scary, which we're talking about at this point, right? Once the level 2 sees something as bad and scary, you set off an alarm. Bad and scary, bad and scary, bad and scary. So in a minute when we do this, I'm going to have you start shouting bad and scary. Because that's what's happening inside the brain. And the way it's wired is you do not update in real time. You just saw something bad and scary, and you need to notify people, because you're the alarm system, that something bad and scary is going on, until someone takes it seriously and does something about it. And the only part of the brain that's wired to do something seriously and do something about it are you folks. So you actually have a nice little switch that you can do. You can tell level 2, we got it. Now the difference is you update in real time, right? So let's go back to the dogs. Remember all the killer dogs I met? You see a dog, is it personally important to you? All right, especially if it's running your direction. Over here?
Bad and scary.
Bad and scary. Yeah, mm-hmm. All right.
Still bad and scary.
Yeah, right. Now, can I share those feelings of bad and scary with someone else? What are the rules about emotions in the family? Now, does this look like it could be emotional? All right, so this is going nowhere. If I let anyone know that I've got feelings going on and they're strong feelings, this is going to what?
Upset mom.
This is going to upset my mother. That's right, absolutely can't do that. You know, already she won't be in the same room with me. Then I haven't even done anything to upset her. God knows what would happen if I upset her. Well, I know a number of things would happen if you upset her, but that's nonetheless, I can't predict it this time. So that's not passing on to you over here, right? So this part of the brain is going to get no signal about what's actually upsetting me or what's going on over there, other than you'll indirectly feel the agitation going on in the system. You'll sense the adrenaline. You will look in front of you and you will see what? A dog, right. So you will conclude that that dog is making me upset, right? Must be. Now, that almost sounds logical, doesn't it? Unless the dog in front of me happens to be Grandma's poodle, right? Who's never done or bitten anybody, and there's no reason whatsoever in the world that anyone that even knows about this lap dog would worry about anything other than being licked to death by the thing, right? But do I have the full-on alarm going? Right, bad and scary. Bad. Am I going to talk with grandmother about why I'm alarmed? No, the system is jammed. It's not processing the information through until there's some way that this table here can figure out how to talk about dogs. And then we can talk about, now that you know that we're talking about dogs and which ones are bad and scary, you can tell them, thank you very much, we've noticed a dog.
Yeah.
That's essentially what the message is. And then you shut off your alarm. Right, okay, they're taking it up. So the point is, level 2 does not update in real time. I look, I see a dog, you pull the files on dogs, dogs are bad. Bad and scary, bad and scary, bad and scary, bad and scary. The level 4 can update in real time and say, okay, we know that about dogs, they're bad and scary, let's check out this dog.
Right.
Because in real time, is this dog being bad or scary or not? And some will and some won't, right? Level 2 will never forget that it's a dog. It'll issue this alarm on every dog. But this, in real time, can update the information on how this dog is acting in the last 1/6 of a second. And here's the interesting thing. If you have shut off the alarm within a 1/6 of a second, going, dog, I'm taking it over, we'll do an analysis on this one in real time and see how this dog runs, you will never notice that the alarm was ever on at all. You'll swear, I don't have that reaction to dogs. I used to have that reaction to dogs, now I don't, because you won't actually start processing for a 1/5 of a second. In that gap of time, the alarm was already shut off, so by the time you became conscious, was there an alarm? No alarm. So you will report, no, in fact, after my healing, the alarm went away. I don't have that fear anymore. Not true. What actually happened is after my healing, the alarm got turned off so fast that A, we never had a chance to pump adrenaline, and B, it was gone before I was actually ever conscious of it. So I act like a non-alarmed person who's present and aware and interacting with the current situation going, oh, what a cute little doggy. Right? But it all hinges on whether or not the signal can get through here. So the shared moment now becomes our most crucial moment in the whole situation. And as soon as you add the ingredient that, okay, am I alone with that dog? All right? Well, I can't talk about it with anybody, but is Jesus unaware of the dog?
He's not unaware.
He's not unaware. He's aware of the dog. Would Jesus talk with me about the dog?
Yes.
Would Jesus notice the intensity of my feelings and what my reactions were to the dog? Yes. Would Jesus know how hard it is to talk with anybody else about the dog?
Yes.
He would. And all of this could be processed with him if my brain only knew it was possible. Okay. Now all I would have to do is have him there, but how do you get him there? Well, you could invite him, but he won't be there unless I invite him. No, what I'm inviting myself to do is to be aware that he's there. Right? I'm trying to get that. So if my brain is in a stable relational attachment mode, I already know he's there. My brain is aware of it before I load the dog. If I let the dog thing run first, now I've got to figure out how do I get an unstable brain that's not passing the signal through, is fully alarmed in all his non-relational feelings running and all the emotions and chemistry and everything of trauma. How do I get it to quiet down enough that I can regain the signal that Jesus is there and remember the times that he was there and pull out a whole different set of memories and stuff like that? And that takes a whole lot longer. That's why typically we find that it takes about 6 times longer to process a trauma, the same trauma, if you start with the trauma feelings and then try to find a stable relationship with Jesus, than if I start with a stable relationship with Jesus and pull it on around. Now you remember the other ingredient that we have, and that is that if I am connected with another person in a stable way, I'm pulling on that relational connection with them to help stabilize my brain while it's learning how to process this relationally, because it doesn't even have memories or experience processing this relationally with anybody. And if you can't love your brother who you have seen, how can you love God who you haven't seen? If you can't process this with a person who you've seen, how can you process it with a person with nobody that you can see? Your brain is going to have a much harder time. Now, I need to make one other little comment, and that is, if you have some experience processing something relationally, God can sometimes be the first person that will connect with you in a memory, but it's not because, it's often because, let's say an anger memory. If you've never had a relational contact with another person during anger, I do not recall a time when God was the first one, right? The brain actually learned how to do this with another person using very small or anger memories to begin with. But once it had learned how to do that, Jesus might very well be the first one to connect with you in something you've never told anybody about. You've never had anybody with you on one this big. You see what I mean? So there's this funny interchange between practicing these things and learning how to be relational with other people, but then God sometimes jumps in and he wants to be the first because no one else is going to handle this very well compared to him. But it's something you've already sort of learned and practiced with other people, and then you go back to practicing with other people. So the point of having Jesus as part of this formula doesn't really tell you whether he'll be the first one that'll connect with you or you will be the first one. I can remember a number of times people being connected with Jesus and Jesus saying to them, I want you to talk about this with Wilder. And I myself saying in my mind to God, I'd rather you did it. But God will sometimes look at you and say, I want you to practice with this person right here. Which way it's going to go is you can't guess, because God does it both ways and he wants it both ways. So we're just open to the fact that we have all these relational options, and God's going to put together the ones he needs in order to, actually he's not trying to resolve trauma. So this is the last thing I'm talking about here. What God is teaching you to do when you get it past here is get it up here to the point where you will learn what it's like me and my people to do. So what's actually happening isn't trauma being resolved as the objective your brain has, and therefore I conclude not as the objective God has. He wants you to make this relational so that you can learn what it's like you and your people to do under these kind of bad conditions, so that even under those conditions you will reflect the presence of God around you, because that's just the kind of people you are. When that happens, the trauma is resolved, and then you will learn to talk about it. But you'll notice a lot of therapies, we're going to try to teach you to talk about it as though that were the way you resolve it. Actually, that's the sign that you have resolved it. while you're trying to learn how to talk about it, these other things are happening without your observing because they're running too fast for your conscious mind. Well, by the time you actually learn to talk about it, that's actually just a symptom that it's processed all the way through. Now we can talk about this, we can break it down. Because now we have some example of what it's like us to do as a people. And the number one thing is we never do it alone. We always live life relationally. There are no non-relational moments for us. There are moments our brain does not know how to handle relationally yet. But there are no non-relational moments because he, in fact, was there for all of them. And once we learn how to do that together and as a people, now we're beginning to act like ourselves. Your brain will no longer have the signs of being traumatized, but to me, the objective is very different. We're actually trying to practice the presence of Jesus and keep that system going all the time so that we notice very quickly when we don't have his presence awareness. And we move to that, and we know who else can help us find that. And so when we come back from lunch, we're going to be talking about a few simple ways that as a community we can teach people to practice the awareness of Jesus. It will, in fact, resolve traumas, but to me that's secondary to what it does, which is primarily teach us what kind of people we are and how to keep that working regardless of what kind of situation we might be in. So, yes.
One quick question.
One quick
Is there
question.
any way, I know that level 2 is very stubborn. Once it decides it's bad and scary, it stays
So,
bad and scary.
le-
Is there
yeah.
any way to help level 2 change its mind?
No, is there any way to help level 2 change its mind? And the answer is no. Level 2 does not change its mind ever.
Right.
So let's say that you've always had a great relationship with your uncle, and this time he pulls a knife on you and comes after you and tries to slit your throat. From that point on, your brain will always remember your uncle could be dangerous. It'll never forget that and go like, oh, that never happened unless something is malfunctioning.
Right.
Then what's actually happening is that memory's not loading into my brain. It will always check your brain. But if you update it in real time and say, is he dangerous now, you can actually turn off that signal before your conscious mind ever knew it was there. So the alarm doesn't have to stay on, but your brain never forgets to check.
Okay.
So what about, it's so traumatic you can't remember that the cortisol valve?
Yeah, if it's so traumatic you can't remember it, what will happen is that every time you try to load it in, level 3 freezes up. So you're going to have more joy and a better connection with somebody, God or others. And sometimes you have to build that joy capacity, the capacity for this system here to keep running under a more emotional load before you can load it in and keep it happening. So the difference will be your brain will either go blank immediately, but if something traumatic stays in your mind and keeps bothering you, you keep getting flashbacks, it means you've got enough capacity in this system up here that you can process it. If you just have the resources, you can stabilize your brain and run it through. If it won't stay in, you will say, I don't remember anything. And then all you can do is build capacity. So one of the things we might talk about this afternoon is how Jesus at times sits down with people and says, we're going to build capacity for a few days, hours, months, even in a few cases years before we go talking about what happened to you. So you're just going to have to learn how to enjoy being with me. And we'll just do that for a while. But that answer your questions?
Yes.